Hi everybody! Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if this is not your first time here. My name is Susie and my channel is The Small Art Society, and today we're going to be doing a sketchbook tour of my tiny sketchbook, which I completed just earlier this week. I love my tiny sketchbook. I love looking at it and seeing how I can see that the pages are all filled up. I thought it would be really cool as well to show you guys what a new one of these sketchbooks looks like. So this sketchbook is the one I've just filled up, and this is a new sketchbook that I have. And I ordered some more of these sketchbooks because I've just been loving tiny painting, and I want to make sure I can continue with my tiny painting because I'm just enjoying it so much. So you can see that there's a little bit of wear and tear on the one that I've completed, but almost nothing compared to what I may expect from a sketchbook that's been fully loved and used and, you know, just completely used up. The cover has bent just a tiny little bit, and obviously the papers have kind of smushed it down together a little bit more, but on the whole, the sketchbook has held up really well. I'm really impressed actually with the way that it's held up. So I've had this sketchbook since September of 2024, and I completed it in February of 2025. So it took me about 5 months to complete this. And I want to take you guys through the paintings that I've made inside this tiny sketchbook. So right as I open it, the very front page is just September 2024. Obviously, I really like dating my sketchbooks so I know when I started them, etc. In the first page, I always put my kind of information, so I've obviously covered that now. This is the first tiny painting that I did. When I received this, I wasn't really sure how I was going to do tiny painting, and I tried to do an approach where I kind of just drew like a portion of something larger, and that was my kind of delving into tiny painting. With this painting here, I was using my Cotman watercolor set, so this was the student grade set. And you can kind of see the colors aren't as strong, obviously, because I was still using the student grade. This is slightly out of order, so I painted some things, and then originally I started painting only on this side of the page, and then I kind of went back and started painting on this side of the page as well. So some of these things are out of order in terms of how I progressed through the sketchbook, but it'll still give you a good idea of kind of what I was painting and my journey into tiny painting. Second tiny painting I did was this one. I painted my tiny little Go Draw palette, which you would have seen in other places in my channel, but just to kind of show you what it looks like, it's this little guy right here. So I decided I wanted to paint my little Go Draw palette, and on this side I've got an apple, which wasn't as successful as I would have liked. I don't think I got the texture of like the bite very kind of reflective of what it looked like, but it was still kind of good fun, and the whole point of tiny sketching for me is to make it more accessible, and by doing kind of smaller paintings I'm able to fit them into my daily life because I work full-time, so that's been kind of a great experience with tiny painting. Here's another painting that I did when I was again focusing on kind of the smaller components of a larger scene. I still really like this one. I was very happy with it when it came out. This is a painting that I came back to later on, and I used my professional watercolors for this one. So I used my artist grade Daniel Smith watercolors for this one, and you can really see the difference in the vibrancy between the oranges in this painting and the oranges in this tiny painting over here. This is my cat Phoebe. Next we have another tiny painting where I focused on some, again, smaller components of a larger scene. This was an amigurumi stuffed animal that my mom made for me. It's a little cat, and it sits on our white bookshelf. And this is the first urban sketch that I did outside of kind of like an Urban Sketchers meetup in London. So this is a boat that is sitting abandoned on the River Medway. And my husband and I were out on a walk one day, and it was really kind of a dark and gloomy day, and this abandoned boat was really poignant, the way it was kind of just sitting, kind of sinking in like marsh, and it only took me about maybe 10 or 15 minutes to paint, and I had a really fun time with it. Again, you can see another painting where I decided to focus on a smaller component of a larger image. And this was a plant that we had on top of our bookcase. This is a little painting of a dog that I made. This was when I kind of came back and started repainting some of the sides of my sketchbook, and I was really happy with this little dog. I was really happy with some of the texture that I was able to get. I find fur really, really challenging, so it was nice to have a bit more of a positive experience when painting an animal. Next, again, we have a little component of a larger scene. This is again an amigurumi stuffed animal that my mom made for me. This stuffed animal sits next to this plant on our white bookshelf. And on this side, I have a Rolex that I decided to paint. By the way, I do on my TikTok channel, on my TikTok page, have some shorts where I have demonstrated the process of painting this or things like that. I think some of them are uploaded to YouTube, but not all of them. So if you're interested in seeing how some of these have come together, I would definitely recommend checking me out on TikTok. We have another tiny painting of my cat Phoebe, and this was earlier on in kind of my tiny painting journey. So you can see that this is almost maybe a little bit more simple than the previous drawing of Phoebe that I showed. I think this one maybe has a little bit more depth to it. It's maybe a little bit more interesting, and this one I'm still really happy with it. I think it's so cute. It does kind of capture her really well, but to me I can see the progression in my drawing when I see this one. And this is a little kitty cat from an image I found on Pinterest. Again, I was really happy with this one because, again, fur I find really, really challenging. I like how this is more of kind of like an animated style, and this is still animated, but maybe making a bit more of an effort to get some texture in there. Again, we have a smaller component of an overall scene, which when I started out with tiny painting was the only type of tiny painting I really felt comfortable with. It took a long time before I felt comfortable kind of trying to put a larger scene onto a tiny format. This was an urban sketch that I did at a church in Medway in England, and I thought it was going to be an interesting composition. I'm not sure how successful it really was in the end, but I had a really nice time painting inside it. This church is 900 years old, and it was really, really lovely to visit it that day and to go on a walk in a beautiful kind of countryside in Kent and stumble upon a beautiful old church and be able to paint in it. You can see this was around the time of the holidays. This is another tiny painting I did of my cat Phoebe, and you can see how much more simple this is compared to some of the drawings that I've shown where I've maybe come back to it when I've had a little bit more experience with animals and fur and kind of texture and things like that. You can see a huge difference between this version of a cat drawing and this version of a cat drawing, and it's always amazing to me kind of seeing how much I've progressed in my sketches in that way. Now this is this is meant to be a cauliflower. This is definitely my least successful tiny painting that I have in this sketchbook. I attended a Daniel Smith kind of live Zoom session where an artist came and showed us how he used his watercolors, and he did an amazing job, and he was showing us about kind of loosely using watercolors and working wet on wet, and I tried to follow along with what he was doing, but I had a really hard time with the colors blending together, and in the end I did realize that I was making parts of the paper wet that shouldn't have been wet in order for me to achieve what I wanted to achieve. So this was a really important learning lesson for me in watercolor. And I look back at this and I remember that I was doing a live, attending a live drawing session, and I remember kind of what I learned when I did this. So it's just a sketchbook. It's not something where everything is meant to be perfect. I'm not too precious about my sketchbooks. I still look at this and think, okay, that was a really good experience, and I'm glad that I did that. This next page is a tiny painting that I made around Halloween. Again, very, very simple before I really started to get comfortable with tiny sketching and tiny painting. And this is a little squirrel that was sat on a fence. And you can really see again how much my tiny painting has progressed. You can see that this is much, much earlier when I was still kind of coming to grips with things, and this is obviously later on where I felt maybe a little bit more comfortable with things. I did start around August time of 2024. I started really kind of painting on a daily basis, where I hadn't done that for a very long time, painting and drawing. And you can see the progression in my drawing skills in some of these drawings here. And that's amazing. That to me shows the real success in the kind of, you know, my kind of art journey. This is a tiny little painting of Lake Quilotoa in Ecuador. Now, I am from Ecuador, so obviously Ecuador has a very special place in my heart. This is from a picture that I myself took when I was there a very long time ago at this specific lake. And it was really, really challenging. It was the first scene that was a really complex scene that I tried to paint in a tiny format. And I was quite happy with the way this came out. Now, this is by no means realism. It's definitely some things that need more work here, but I was really happy with this as a first attempt. This is a much more recent painting. This is my little kind of sketching kit. So if you've been on my channel before, you might recognize my sketching kit and my Daniel Smith palette here. And that is what I painted. I was watching a movie and was kind of a little bit lacking in inspiration. Decided to just paint whatever was in front of me, and I was really happy with it. This is a tiny painting that was really, really tricky. Those buildings were super complicated. I don't think this is very effective. I mean, in some respects it's not very effective. In other respects you can kind of get a sense of what it is and where it is. This is a little tiny village in Cinque Terre in Italy, and again, really, really tricky for me. But I was really, you know, glad that I was pushing myself to do more kind of complex things in a tiny format. And this is a much more recent painting, a tiny little acorn. I was really happy with it. You can see the difference from when I was using my Cotman watercolors to when I was using my professional Daniel Smith watercolors. You can see the difference here as well. The colors when I was using the Cotman watercolors, the colors are just a little bit more dull. The colors of my Daniel Smith set are so much more vibrant. So I tend to gravitate towards these a lot. Here was the first time where I felt a little bit braver in capturing something quite complex on a tiny format. I was really happy with this. There's some things that are slightly off, but overall, I was really happy with being able to capture all those little details. You can see the Xbox, that's obviously an Xbox, and the little kind of tubs that we have underneath our television set. Super, super happy with this. And then I thought it would be fun to do some kind of tiny watercolor swatches. And so I swatched out all of my professional watercolors here. And these are mostly Daniel Smith, but some of these are also Schminke. And one of these is also Rosa Gallery. So Opera Rose is a Rosa Gallery. Again, like I said, I have tons of shorts kind of showing how I did this or showing the process of it. Definitely the tiny watercolor swatches. I have a short on YouTube where I did that, and I think that's also on TikTok as well. So if you're interested in kind of how I did these, definitely make sure to go to my shorts on my channel and have a quick look, because quite a lot of the paintings that I have in this tiny sketchbook are have been captured in some format in my shorts. Now, this was when I went to the London Urban Sketchers for the very first time, and the meeting was in December 2024, and this was at Tower Bridge. And I had an amazing time, met some good sketching friends. We've subsequently been on other sketching adventures together, which you'll see in this book. And I had a great time. I mean, I've never done urban sketching before. This was the very first time that I drew out in public, and it was an amazing time. I do have a video on my channel where I talk a little bit more about my reflections on urban sketching as somebody that is quite new to urban sketching. I'll link it in the eye so you can go and check that out if you would be interested. But yeah, absolutely love urban sketching. It's been life-changing for me, and I'm so excited to continue to explore that in 2025. This next spread here is from the London Urban Sketchers meetup in January 2025, and this was in Kew Gardens, which is southwest in London. And this was a freezing cold day, And I was having to take breaks almost every couple of minutes to just warm my fingers up because I was cold. I kept having to stand up and walk around a little bit because I was just freezing. I was genuinely freezing on the bench that I was sitting on. At one point, there was another sketcher nearby me, and I kind of went up to her and just made sure she was doing okay, because I was like, surely if I'm freezing and, you know, about to freeze onto this chair, she probably is as well. She was faring, I think, a little bit better than I was, but I really like this. I had a very fun time painting this. I captured the overall grayness of the day very well, I think, as well. One thing I'm really proud of with this sketch is I kind of subtly incorporated the reflection of the building in the water, and water is tricky, super tricky, so I felt happy about being able to have done that. Here we have some still lifes of reference pictures that I found on Pinterest. This is a garlic, obviously. I love this painting. This spread here makes me really happy. This garlic, I love the detail in it. It's not perfect. There's some things that are not 100% correct with like the color and the shadows on this side, but overall, I'm really happy with the way that this generally looks. And then on this side, I have a still life of a few kind of food-related items. Very happy with this. I love the way that I was able to get the kind of darkness to show some shadows. That can be really difficult sometimes in watercolor, knowing when to kind of push that and when to back off a bit, especially on such a tiny format. But this is probably one of my most successful still life inspired paintings from a reference image on Pinterest that I've ever done, I think. And this pear, I love this pear. You can see that for some of these I'm using, so for these two paintings and little drawings here, I have only used watercolor to create a sense of depth and to get some color and some, yes, just some depth in it. But in some of these images, I tried to use some hatching and my fine liner to get some depth. So you might be able to see that there are some lines there that kind of indicate where the shadows were on the pear. And that's a technique that I've been playing around with. Some things I've done in one way, some things I've done in another way. I think they both have their merits and they're both very interesting. But I'm really curious to find out what people's perspectives are on this, because I made a poll on Instagram and I also posted on Scott Christian Sava's community page to kind of get some feedback from people about the techniques and what they thought, what they liked, what they thought looked well, looked good. Just out of curiosity from fellow artists, you know, perspectives that people had about these techniques. And I got some really good feedback, but I'm still really curious. I'm playing around with these techniques, and I like them both. And yeah, I'm curious about people's opinions. So if you have any opinions about the use of fine liner to kind of create some depth versus just watercolor, please put them below. It'd be lovely to read your thoughts, to hear about your thoughts. Now this painting is one that I struggled with. I think I might have overworked the paper a little bit. These are meant to be figs. Sometimes I think they look more like onions than figs, and in that respect I think this is maybe my most unsuccessful tiny painting, but it was really tricky to get the values correct and to know when to push and when to back off and to get the texture of the fig without making it look like an onion, and also without getting too realistic, because obviously that's not 100% my style. So this was a really tricky one. And in that same vein, this was the same day. So I painted this on the same day I painted this. And this one, I overworked the paper. So you can see how overworked the paper is right there. And it does look like cherries, and I have gotten the kind of highlights and the darks, but I don't know what I did here. I tried to get some shadows where I should not have gotten any shadows, and I overworked the paper, so I wasn't too happy with this one. This page generally was not great, but I learned a lot from it. On the other hand, I love this tiny drawing of some flowers in a little flower pot. So cute. I love the tiny flowers. Flowers have always been really difficult for me to draw, so I was really happy with this one. And similarly, I was super happy with these peaches. These peaches, the colors are just so vibrant. I mean, I cannot say enough good things about the Daniel Smith watercolors. They are just so vibrant, and I'm really happy with the performance of them. And you can see that I did use a little bit of fine liner to get some depth on the sides. This was a painting that I did for the Landscape Art Club on Instagram. If you don't follow them, it's basically a community of artists, and every week the owners of the Instagram page post some reference pictures and send it out to the community so that they can paint their interpretations of it, and then they reshare it. So this is a desert. I had so much fun painting this. It was a tricky landscape, but I think I was able to emulate some type of interpretation of that image in an interesting way. And then I have some more kind of food related paintings. So some avocados, a cup of coffee with some coffee beans, which I was really, really happy about. I really like these. The foam is really difficult to get right, but I was happy with it. I love the vibrancy of the colors in the avocado. Just makes me so happy seeing that green and seeing that be so intense. And then I have another painting of some fruit. So these are some apple slices. This one is maybe a little bit less successful, but it's an interesting composition, drawing something from like a head, basically looking down on it. And yeah, tricky. It was really tricky getting the shadows correct for this. I actually don't think I got the shadows correct for this at all, but it doesn't really matter because it's just a page of my sketchbook and it's just meant for me to have some fun and play around with it. This is a painting of a rose. Now, flowers are tricky for me, but I had a fun time with it. I think I was able to get some of those shadows in with the watercolor, you know, in a way that was somewhat effective, and I'm very, very happy about that. So I'm happy with this little rose. This is a leaf that I painted. This page right here, so this spread, I wasn't feeling too inspired, you know? And I think you can really tell. You can really tell that I wasn't super feeling it when I painted these. This is quite flat. This one's not very, like, not done very well. And it's like, I think like the anatomy of the tomato is like off. So you can kind of see my heart wasn't in it. And I find that amazing. Like if I look back to some of the other paintings that I've done, like these two, man, my heart was feeling it when I was painting these. I was so happy. I was so proud. I really kind of felt it. Like I was in that moment painting these things. With these two, my headspace was off, and I know my headspace was off. And it's interesting how big of a difference it makes when your headspace is a little bit off to what you end up producing. I think it speaks volumes to headspace as an artist. Now this is when my sketch friends and I went to the British Museum to do some urban sketching inside, because we did this on the 1st of February and it was freezing. So I do have some shorts on my channel on YouTube and on TikTok and Instagram of the process of completing these. If you guys are interested in checking these out, I would suggest heading over to my page, either on Instagram, TikTok, or here on YouTube, and looking at the shorts. This was a monument that was very large. I mean, it took up an entire part of this like big kind of hall in the museum, in the British Museum. And I chose to do it in tiny format, which meant I had to forego some level of detail. Like I couldn't focus on making the exact shapes of the people correct on the stones down here or up here. It just wasn't going to be possible for me to get that perfectly accurate because it was just, I was painting on such a tiny format. The statues, I kind of generally emulated the shape that their bodies were in, but they were tricky, very, very tricky. After I finished this, I had a little bit of time left over before we left, so I decided to paint a statue that was near where we were sitting. And man, that was tough. I've never drawn a body, done anything with a human figure, with a human form on such a tiny format. And to like add like complexity to the matter, there was also fabric that she was holding and fabric behind her, and it kind of fell on her. Like it was tricky. It was really, really tricky, but I was still really happy with this. I love this spread. I love it. It just makes me happy. And then I have some more food. This is the page that I posted on Scott Christian Sava's community page on YouTube, and also on Instagram with a poll to see what people kind of preferred. Because in this painting right here with the peppers, I used a fine liner to get some depth. So you can see that there are some lines on the side of the red pepper and on the side of the yellow pepper and the green pepper, and I used the fine liner to create some depth. Whereas with the pancakes, I just let them be and didn't use fine liner to add depth, but I used watercolor to try to add depth. And I really like this spread. I'm so intrigued by how you can get such different but still just as interesting results just by changing something as minor as using fine liner or not, basically. Again, I'm super interested to hear people's thoughts about this. So if you have an opinion or if you have a preference for what style you like a bit more, whether it's using fine liner or just using watercolor, please let me know. Here I have just some basic grapes and a banana that I painted as well. This one was tricky. I think I was so traumatized from the figs that I didn't want to overwork the paper, and I didn't want to lose some of what I was painting, so I didn't add too many shadows to the grapes, and that was probably a mistake, but it's okay. It's just part of the learning process. And again, this is just a sketchbook, so I'm not being precious about this. On the next page, we have a cactus in a pot and a pomegranate. And for both of these, I actually didn't use my Daniel Smith watercolor paints. I used the Cotman set. And the reason for that is because I used my Go Draw palette. And my Go Draw palette it's filled with student grade watercolors at the moment. I'm trying to use it up and basically paint with this more so that I use it up so that I can fill it up with artist grade watercolors. So I painted a cactus, painted a pomegranate. Pomegranate would have been much more vibrant if I had used the Daniel Smith paints, but again, it's just a sketchbook. It's nothing serious. I had fun with it, and that's all that matters. Here I have a very simple sketch of some oranges and a cute little bunny that I painted. This bunny was tricky. I've painted bunnies before where I made the mistake of going around with a fine liner and making an outline of the bunny, and that's been to the detriment of the drawing because like animal fur doesn't have hard edges like that. It's much more soft and subtle. So I tried to kind of correct that error that I've made in the past here and not use a fine liner to make like hard edges around the bunny. And I think that was much more effective. The bunny is not 100% correct proportionally, but it doesn't matter. It's cute. This next page is a kiwi. You can see I've really been enjoying painting food lately. Been absolutely loving it. And on this next page, I have a scene of the cliffs of Moher. So I participated in the Landscape Art Club challenge on Instagram, but this is from Julianne Sinclair's art challenge on Instagram. If you're interested in kind of seeing those, it's also a weekly challenge. If you go to Instagram and put in the hashtag I painted that, all is one word, you'll be able to find her page and kind of participate in that if you'd like as well. I highly recommend it. It's very cool seeing what other people paint. I think it's great because I think these types of challenges just mean that you're not thinking about what you're going to paint. Somebody tells you, this is what you're painting this week. And then you can just interpret that however you want. So it's really cool taking part in these. I, again, strongly recommend them. And this is the last page in my tiny sketchbook. So this is a cute little angry pig that I painted. I'm surprised he came out looking so angry. In the reference picture, he was not so angry, but he came out looking very angry here. And the final painting in my tiny sketchbook is this egg on toast. And if you've been on my channel before, you would have already seen the video that I posted last week of me going through the whole process of painting this. Again, I'll link it in the eye in case you're interested in watching that and you haven't seen it already. But I thought it would be really cool to share with you guys the process of sketching this out from pencil to fine liner to then going in with watercolor and adding in details and depth and everything. So you can go see that on my channel if you're interested. I talk a lot more in depth about the process in that video, but I had a really fun time painting this, and I'm glad that I was able to record it and share with everybody on YouTube. And finally, the last page, it just says February 2025. So this sketchbook kind of shows things that I've been painting from September 2024 to February 2025. This sketchbook is, you can purchase it through GoDraw, which is the company, but their sketchbooks themselves are made by Inkberry. These are great little sketchbooks. The elastic is great. I mean, you can imagine this sketchbook has been with me through so many adventures over the past 5 months, and it's still held up really well. The elastic is great. I mean, it has not come apart at all. I have other sketchbooks and notebooks and bullet journals and things where after like time goes by, the more that you use it, this elastic just completely falls apart. But this one is great. I'm so happy with it. It's funny because you can kind of see how it's kind of tilting to one side, whereas the new one doesn't do that. And that just kind of shows how much I've used this. Like, there's a little bit of wear and tear, but on the whole, I'm so glad that it's held up so well. It's like an archival piece, really. You know, it's something, not archival, it's like an heirloom piece. You know, it's something that hopefully will be kind of passed down generations, and, you know, people kind of later on in my family will be able to see what I was painting and look back on these videos and hear about those paintings, and maybe watch the process of how I painted some of these things. And I think that's really cool, the longevity of putting things on the internet, and also just kind of sharing your story and your art process and the things that you're painting with the world. So having said that, if you're still here, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed going and looking through my tiny sketchbook with me. It also really helps the channel out if you leave this video a like or drop a comment below. Feel free to let me know which one of those techniques you like the most, or if there's a particular painting in here that you really enjoyed seeing. And thank you so much for spending this time with me and going through this with me. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and see you in the next video.